Good evening, I'm Steve Kornacki, filling in tonight for Chris Matthews in New York. Let me start tonight with those Patriot games that Rudy Giuliani is now playing. Tough Talk started as a shot at the president's love of country, and things have only spiraled from there. It began as an attack on what Republicans see as a weakness for President Obama. The soft talk about the root causes of terrorism, the cool and calm way he tends to talk about terrorism, prompted Giuliani to say this: "I do not believe that the president loves America. He doesn't love you, and he doesn't love me. He wasn't brought up the way you were brought up, and I was brought up through love of this country." Whatever point Giuliani was trying to make has now been consumed by talk about Giuliani himself. America's mayor has responded by launching an all-out media blitz. In the face of criticism, he has upped the rhetoric even higher. As was Giuliani on a tear last night on Fox News.
Mr. Mayor, do you want to apologize for your comment?
Not at all. I want to repeat it. The reality is, from all that I can see of this president, all that I've heard of him, he apologizes for America. He criticizes America. I think that is a perfectly reasonable opinion. But the president, in his comments, if we look at all of his rhetoric, has not displayed the kind of love of America, the kind of love of American exceptionalism that other American presidents have displayed. I'm right about this. I have no doubt about it. I do not withdraw my words. We haven't even mentioned some of the other communists and leftists who educated him as a young man. But all we need is Reverend Wright. 17 years in that church, and that man condemned America over and over and over again, and he remained a member of that church.
The president suggested he wasn't there for those sermons.
The other parishioners didn't tell him about it?
In other interviews, he's offered some head-scratching reasons for these kinds of comments. We're going to get to those in just a minute. Meanwhile, though, the fallout continues to grow. Now includes Giuliani's former administration staff member, Mike Paul, who said this about his former boss, quote, "I believe his comments were disrespectful to President Obama, his family, and America." Mike Paul joins us now, along with Eugene Robinson, the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist from The Washington Post and an MSNBC political analyst. So, Mike, let me start with you. A former aide to Rudy Giuliani, we have your words there criticizing him for this. You know this guy. You worked up close with him. Do you recognize this man? Have you seen this Rudy Giuliani before?
I haven't seen this Rudy Giuliani before, and the reason why I haven't seen this Rudy Giuliani before is that we were working on city issues and we weren't working on national issues and global issues. And I have to say, you know, I've got to keep it 100 here, like Larry Wilmore says on Comedy Central, but this is no joking matter. You actually saw the mayor with a nervous laugh while he was on Fox News, and I actually think that this is an abomination, what he's saying. I want to separate myself as far as possible from him when I hear him say things like this.
Well, where do you think it's coming from? I mean, so there's a separation, you're saying, between city stuff and national stuff, but I mean, this is clearly something he feels strongly about. He's had opportunity after opportunity to take this back. Instead, he keeps going further. So it certainly, I get the sense he's thought about this a lot. He's thought about questions like this a lot. And you never got any inkling that Giuliani felt anything like this?
Here's what I see. I see a man that is still very interested in being relevant within the political process nationally. We are gearing up for a presidential campaign, and he wants to make himself relevant. These are my opinions as to what he's doing. And I think as he's scratching and trying to hold on to some relevancy, I think he put his foot in his mouth. He's going to continue to realize, especially in a city like New York and a state like New York, which continues to be his base, by the way, where 3/4 of the people that live in New York City, for example, like people like Gene and I fully know, are 3/4 people of color. This is his base. This is the place that he governed for more than one term. And you have a president that is now the president of the United States, as he so wisely and articulately said during his State of the Union, has won twice. Respect the man, respect the presidency of the United States, the seat that you yourself, Mr. Mayor, were running for. I don't think that you want to also have comments that come back to bite him. His family is also feeling this. You know as a mayor that your family and yourself were attacked personally. There's no reason for personal attacks. Keep it from a policy perspective and from a political perspective, but do not attack the man personally. He obviously loves this country enough to have not only run once, but twice and won both times.
Right,
Be respectful.
Well, Giuliani is adamant that his attack on President Obama does not reflect any racial prejudice. This is what he told the New York Times. He said, quote, "Some people thought it was racist. I thought that was a joke. Since he was brought up by a white mother, a white grandfather, went to white schools. Most of this he learned from white people." Gene Robinson, I wonder what you make of the point that Mike was just making there. Mike saying he thinks this is Rudy Giuliani catering to a national Republican conservative base. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I think somebody should tap him on the shoulder and say, "Stop digging." You know, as he tries to explain this and justifies it, he digs himself a deeper hole and sounds more ridiculous. And frankly, that's the way he sounds to most of the country. I think if he's playing to anybody, if there's anybody you can play to with this, it's the far right fringe of the Republican Party, the fringe that is just irreconcilably opposed to President Obama and everything he stands for, everything he ever was or ever will be, who just can't stand the idea that he's president. Those weren't the people that Giuliani sought to represent when he tried to run for president. So in terms of a base, I think he's forsaken what used to be his base. Right. And what he's going for now, I don't see where that gets him except further and further out on the fringe into irrelevancy.
Well, Giuliani defended his comments also on Sean Hannity's radio show yesterday. Let's take a listen to that.
President Obama didn't live through September 11. I did. President Obama didn't almost have a building fall on him. Myself and my police commissioner and my fire commissioner did, and I lost 10 of my very close friends. Excuse me, it's a little bit emotional for me, but it's also real. These people are dangerous. When they start chopping the heads of Christians off, when they start bombing Jews, we're moving in a direction that is exceedingly dangerous.
So let's talk about the politics here for a second, Gene, because this all started at an event where Scott Walker, Republican presidential candidate, was in attendance. Mm-hmm. He's since been asked about this. Okay, you were there. Rudy Giuliani said this. He's shown no interest of wading into this. A lot of these other Republican candidates have now been asked about it. Mm-hmm. They're sort of trying to walk a fine line of not condemning Rudy Giuliani on this. So we say he's walking towards the fringes. At the same time, he's put himself smack in the middle of this Republican presidential race.
Well, they're running for president, and they look, what is the first thing they run into is Iowa, where you have to be far right to have a chance to win. And so, understandably, they're approaching this in a sort of gingerly fashion. But ultimately, they're all going to be asked about it, and they're going to have to comment on it. And let me say one thing about what Rudy Giuliani said in that clip. 9/11 was a national tragedy. It wasn't just a personal tragedy. That's right. For him. It was a tragedy for the whole country. President Obama did live through 9/11. I lived through 9/11. Many hours later, as I'm driving home from the Washington Post, I go across the bridge and see the plume of smoke over the Pentagon, where people who I know had lost relatives on this plane. So he cites it as a personal tragedy, as if somehow he owns 9/11. He did a good job as mayor. Leave it at that. Let's commend him for that. But it's everyone's tragedy.
Yeah, I wonder, Mike, again, somebody who knows him, somebody's seen him up close. I mean, we all know 9/11 in terms of the public's image of Rudy Giuliani. It has everything to do with what happened that day, with his leadership on that day, that sort of thing. But it also seems like, to hear his comments here, it seems like that might have changed him in terms of how he presents himself to people.
He's been told by many in aid and by many that are close to him after 9/11 that he needs to be more humble with his approach of talking about it. He had the fire union, for example, make an ad, a very powerful ad, the New York FDNY Fire Department's union, who came out against him because he has positioned himself as America's mayor, and that he made a lot of money and he rebuilt his reputation off of the backs of others. I actually think that he has lost the throne of being able to be successfully called America's mayor anymore, quite frankly. Not only because of his recent comments, but the way he positioned himself after 9/11. The best approach, the best way to describe yourself after 9/11 is to say, there were men and women who put their lives on the line in the city that I govern, but they did the work. They are the ones who sacrificed themselves. And a large percentage of the money that he's made and a large percentage of the reputation that he gained needs to go back to those men and women.
Well, so what kind of, Gene, in terms of a legacy here, you're talking about for the moment he's marginalizing himself, but right, he will always be connected. When we look back at history, this dark day in American history, September 11th, 2001, Rudy Giuliani and what he said and what he did that day and in the immediate aftermath of that day will always be an integral part of that story. At the same time, this is where we are, 13 years later. What kind of legacy do you think he's ultimately working toward here?
Well, he's writing new chapters in that legacy, and they're not favorable ones, frankly. And yes, we will always remember him on that day. We will remember him as brave and stalwart and in command and all the things he was on that day. I have those recollections. It was the day in my life. I was proud of Rudy Giuliani. I was proud of George W. Bush right after 9/11. But the mayor, I think, it's absolutely right that he is forfeiting his status as America's mayor, and these new chapters in the legacy that he's writing are really, it's just really a shame. It's really a shame.
Yeah, well, we'll see now. It's the early days of this Republican presidential race. We'll see when these candidates start coming to New York for money, maybe for endorsements too. We'll see if Rudy Giuliani is still a part of all that. Anyway, though, thank you now to Mike Paul, Eugene Robinson. Appreciate you.